Okay, so we're at our third part of the evening, the group share, group Q&A. This is a time for anyone to share reports about what tonight was like, or questions they've been having in general, or about tonight, or any song or dance or poetry. A lot can be on the table. So, floor is yours. Yeah.
A poem about my experience, just remembering it now. It's called Ego. What will my ego be? My eyes lay bare, myself to see. I stare at what's a reflection of me. A million mirrors surround my soul. Will they bound me or make me whole? The world that revolves outside, with myself from me I hide. As the world that evolves inside asks itself, where does truth reside?
Thank you. Well said. Yeah.
I noticed when we were doing the interpersonal meditation there, when we were cultivating compassion, it was a lot of really nice sensations in the body. But sometime in, I noticed a couple of times I became so absorbed in my experience that my eyes actually drifted away from looking at my partner, or at least like down towards the chin and cheek as opposed to towards the ear. Got lost in it a little bit.
In my experience, I do that all the time, and I just gotta go with it. Yeah. Eventually come back to their eyes. But, I'm glad to hear. Sounds like that was did something for you. Yes.
Just after the end of the first part of the gazing at my partner, closed my eyes for the first time in the absence of grounding in her eyes, created a shock, a recoil that unbalanced my whole body. And my awareness flooded into my upper back pain, which shot straight up. The second time around, after the compassion resonance, when I closed my eyes, it was still a shock, still a recoil, but much lighter, and settled into calmness, and the pain in my body was far diminished.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that people can be the source of so much emotional turmoil and also so much peace. And sometimes the person doesn't do anything different, or not much has changed. So it's nice to see how that plays out, what's going on there. Can I ask you a question? Was that that neck pain, that shoulder pain there before we did any of this stuff, or? Oh, cool. So when you were making eye contact, it like kind of, you got so absorbed that just like disappeared during the eye gazing.
Where it lessened.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Hmm. That's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I also noticed during the interpersonal meditation that I was paying less attention, or it was harder for me to pay attention to sensations in my body,
Mm-hmm.
more distracted by thoughts around attention. A little self-consciousness, you know, what is this person thinking about me? And then eventually turned around to where I was asking myself, okay, am I making this person feel uncomfortable, giving them all of this attention?
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess is normal things to come up when you're interacting with someone.
Mm-hmm.
But just noticed that it was harder. It became easier as we went further into it.
Mm-hmm.
But those are things that came up at least at the beginning.
Mm. So initially there was like a more self-consciousness and thinking about the experience and the eye contact, that it was harder to stay with your body
Right.
than if your eyes were like closed and not looking at someone. And then that shifted as each exercise went on.
Yeah.
Did you ever notice it became easier to stay with your body, or notice more clearly or quickly what's happening?
Right, as time went on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's interesting because so much of most daily interactions with people is so fast and quick that don't have access to like our bodies, and then 20 minutes go by and I'm in a lot of anger, and then I know what I feel. So it's nice to slow down and sort of feel what we feel, and sort of a common challenge when I teach this kind of form of meditation, that there is, in my experience at least, often that initial jolt of self-consciousness and sort of like getting my bearings. Maybe some people don't have this experience, but it's mine at least, and a lot of people's. And it seems like, well, why do we do this? Why don't we just sit alone where I can actually feel myself and don't have this added layer of complexity and difficulty? And yet, strangely, we also have other reports where it kind of like helps the physical pain diminish and actually get more in our bodies. So it seems like, as I said at the beginning, people can be both a source of, maybe source is the wrong word because they're not really the source, can catalyze a lot of not being present, not being mindful, or it can actually help us be more mindful and more present. It's nice to realize that this is also a skill and a practice, rather than just assuming, oh, I need to be more present, I need to be more nicer, I need to be this or that, and instead that there are actually ways we can practice this. And grateful that there are other people willing to do such a weird thing, like look at each other for extended amount of time. So that's great. Let me get to the others first. Yeah.
I want to share some gratitude about the interactions that were salient for me and the particular challenge level of this gazing practice. For me, I also found myself completely absorbed and losing track of like pre-existing pain, which right now is super salient. And yet, an intensification, a powerful intensification of other internal experience. Like I felt my heartbeat reverberate throughout my body and I could hear the particular way in which it did that in a very different way than I usually hear it when it's powerful enough for me to audibly follow and enthralling in that way. And as my experience continued and I played with it and took a particular stance to it, it did become a source of immense pleasure. That I just want to sort of, more so than pointing to that fact, what I want to emphasize is my gratitude for this idea that I'm telling a story that what explains the intensity of the experience is that when I looked into my partner's eyes, there was nowhere to hide. By having a person right in front of me, a person, it's just so self-evident that there's care. I can't go anywhere. I can't make up concepts. I can't remove myself from the experience. So any of the intensity that I had been building up prior to this particular exercise, and then also the full intensity of the moment, doesn't have anywhere to go but to flourish in the present. And for me, that was like a pressure cooker that just gave me like a powerful resonance with each moment that I then had to work hard to figure out and to be okay with and then try to take a stance towards. So I think I'm grateful for what happened, and particularly grateful for just this idea of this is some good accountability. Go people.
Yeah, it turns out in most human history, people did stuff with other people. So it's a good technology to utilize. And it's funny because I did a long retreat in a cabin, and at one point I was judging myself very harshly for being distracted. And I just imagined, because I've done this so many times at this point, that I just imagined someone in front of me was looking at me, like the wall was looking at me. And it was weird that my mind immediately just dropped into place. I think I just like a Pavlovian dog, just sort of like trained myself, like, oh, someone's looking at me, drop in, okay. Yeah, like quality of now I'm responsible for another person, like even whether or not it's true or not, the felt sense for me at least is if I'm making eye contact with someone doing this, it's like, oh, now I'm like partly responsible for now us. And I don't want to screw up my side of the bargain. So, kind of in it now. Of course, now translating that into the opposite thing we talked about Greg, but sort of like now translating that into sitting on our own. So maybe for some of us, it's actually a lot easier to be by ourselves, and for other people, it might be easier to be with someone else, or there's a lot more possibilities than just those two. But we can kind of use this kind of practice then to do, as you said, sort of figure out what's going on here and then reverse engineer it so we can bring it to ourselves in solo practice, and maybe also use solo practice to bring it into connection with other people. So there can be a mutual fertilization, crossover. Thanks for sharing. That's really interesting, this anchoring, accountability buddy.
I should probably emphasize though that it's like when there's a responsibility involved, that's really easy to use as a mechanism of flow from my experience to direct it in that way. So we're doing this activity, we can go in these directions, I can think about these forms of responsibility for us. But instead of doing nothing with another person, that really like forces all the everything hidden, all the hidden energy to flow forward.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, who knew? Doing nothing with someone so great.
I think along those lines, I really appreciated the opportunity to do this with a mask on.
Oh yeah.
And both it allowing me to not regulate my facial expressions that much, and at the same time have them too. And also, the sort of focusing on the eyes aspect. It's just interesting for me. I've been really appreciating that opportunity in general in society, and I mean sometimes it's frustrating and tiresome too. But I mean it's optional in this situation for me anyways, but it's just sort of an appreciation of that, like feel like my facial expressions aren't necessarily always socially correct if I just let them go naturally, so it's sort of very long ago kind of learned to suppress them, and I feel like this pandemic is becoming an opportunity for me to let it sort of grow naturally a little bit and see if it sort of comes out in some sort of new way. So it's just kind of cool to have to appreciate the opportunity to then be in a space where I am connecting with other people with it. So.
It's very cool that you can notice that the mask almost helps create more intimacy or comfort or trust or connection, freedom of expression, or somewhere in that family. Yeah. It reminds me that sometimes we do this, what we call circling or interpersonal meditation up at the academy. And one time, one of the facilitator teachers volunteered to do a night hike. They're going to walk down the hill and back, and they're going to circle, they're going to practice this, sort of just speaking truthfully, authentically, whatever's happening, while they're walking in the dark. And you can't make eye contact, and you're moving. And the people that joined reported later that somehow walking in the dark actually gave them something so that they could actually express more freely and feel more connected. Whereas maybe being in a bright room locked in might have been too overwhelming or too much in some way that they were struggling with. So it's interesting to see how you can add things that would seem to be inhibit, but actually might open up opportunities for some people more so. So it's interesting to see that play out. I'm going to go to her since she had her hand raised.
I think it was really unique for me to look at someone I know very well, not making any overt expression, and how often kind of look for those clues or those cues on someone's face for, reaffirmation or validation or some indication on how they're feeling or what their emotion might be or their will towards you. And maybe the first time that I ever really noticed someone's just blank canvas face, and then when I knew that they had a positive intention towards me, how they were the same, and how I might assume that someone's blank canvas face, or just a lack of validating, a smile or something, how I might assume that might be negative. But it was exactly the same as when I knew they were positive. And so just I think remembering that you're not a mind reader, and somebody's lack of positive affirmation doesn't have to be negative. They might not be feeling negatively towards you. They might be feeling positively towards you. And just kind of not to assume what someone's intention might be, because you can't overtly tell what it is, or a clue or a cue.
Right.
And I don't know if I ever really paid so much attention to just how they look exactly the same.
Wow. It sounds like for you it was an insightful experience of like, I had a story that if they look this way, then they must be disinterested or bored, like something's not positive. But then you had the insight of, actually it's perceived the same face, but actually they're having a completely different experience.
Just kind of generalizing that to strangers or anyone you meet, and looking for something,
Right.
and thinking how, assuming they must be feeling a particular way or not.
Right. Wow, that's great. Thanks for reporting that. Wow. Jesse, do you have something?
Well, since there was no partner,
Yeah.
I got over that, and I said, okay, there were people in my experience today, and one of them was somebody I know very well, somebody who is, I feel a sensitive connection to, and who wants to be quite separate with the COVID experience, and we were both affected by it, the energy right now. And what happened was we were pretty far apart, and we were exhausted, and we didn't have any eye contact, and we were laying down outside in the sunshine because of the it was so warm, and the effect of that was to not have any of the stimulus that you were talking about, but I was aware of how powerful the connection was. And it might be valuable to try another time with maybe your group that knows each other, to do that, you know, it's not as if it's an intimate partnership where you're snuggled up close and you're having a strong conversation. It's more this separation and over a distance without any eye contact, because, you know, we're exhausted, eyes are closed, and we're just laying down near each other. But there's a total connection, so that very little words were necessary to communicate quite a bit of information and a lot of compassion or caring or whatever. So in that environment of compassion, to experience the exchange was quite interesting, and for me to revisit it now, because there was no partner, what I found really interesting. And I at first was, oh, I don't like this, you know, but it became valuable.
Great.
And might be valuable in the whole group.
Absolutely. It reminds me of what came to my mind, at least, was a lot of meditation retreats I've done where you don't actually interact with anyone else. Less so at the academy, because we all kind of live and spend a lot of time with each other, even if you're a guest. But I've gone to places where you don't ever talk to the people next to you. And yet, by the end of the retreat, it's like it feels like a strong bond. Sometimes hatred, but usually a strong, usually a strong bond. Even though we don't, but we're just having an experience together. And the depth of feeling that experience together creates a really strong bond. So thanks for sharing.
I don't know whether what I said is that, but maybe there's something connected.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're saying because you're next to each other and you're experiencing the same thing.
I don't even know if it's the same thing, but yeah.
I'm wondering if you could take that experience and after a period of time connect with the person that you have had that parallel experience with.
Right.
And see if there something has occurred where a different kind of conversation
Right.
emerges.
Right. That would be very interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm.